the May Holbeach Parish Council meeting had saw Mr. Poll attend with a bird feeder. It was also to mark the return of Mrs. Hutchison back to the council. She had been previously chair of the council in 2007 to 2008, and Mr. Poll had wrote a letter to her in her position of chair of the council regarding Mr. Palmer's fence, but she did nothing. Fitting, therefore, that she be joining a group of councillors who didn't want to do anything about Mr. Palmer's fence. Councillor Savoury opened the meeting and announced that item 1 was the appointment of a new chairman. Mr. Poll then stood up and said, "Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Open forum." Councillor Savoury then replied, "There's no open forum. It's the AGM." To which Mr. Poll replied, "Doesn't say AGM on my agenda." Councillor Savoury replied, "It's the annual general meeting." To which Mr. Poll replied, "On my agenda it says a meeting of the above council, and council meetings start with an open forum." Councillor Savoury snapped, "It's the annual general meeting, and that's the end of the matter." So Mr. Poll sat down. Councillor Savoury was subsequently appointed chairman for the ensuing year. Councillor Terry Harrington was appointed vice chairman, with Councillor Arthur Mail proposed and seconded and appointed chair of allotments for the ensuing year. So the councillor who had been chair of allotments for nearly 6 years in March, who didn't know where one of his blocks of allotments were, was reappointed. Was it a vote of confidence, or a vote that nobody else wanted the job? When it came to the minutes, a letter was reported from Mrs. Jones, stating that she had not resigned at the March council meeting, as stated in the March minutes. She had actually resigned a few days later. Councillors agreed that the March minutes should be changed, to which the minutes book was opened and amended by Councillor Savoury, and signed by him, and also signed by the clerk, Mrs. Daisley. But these minutes were signed as a true and accurate record at the April meeting, so these minutes should not have been amended. The two clerks were to report on a benchmark exercise regarding council burial fees. This was rather a pun after what had gone on before regarding benches in the cemetery. Councillor Hutchinson proposed an increase, which was agreed. When Mr. Poll left the group of people outside the council offices after the meeting, Mr. Baird was to drive past him slowly in his 4x4. A few days later, down at the Crownfield Bank allotments, was spotted a bird feeder. On closer inspection, it was not on the allotments, just over the boundary, with no feeding spout and no sign of corn ever being near it. Where the bird feeder was on the daffodil rows, the tops appeared to have been trimmed off. For years, the council had tried to extend the Park Road Cemetery, but never followed the lines of a compulsory purchase. Ultimately, the plot of land in question received planning permission for one house, and was bought by Councillor John King, who offered to sell so much of the plot back to the parish council. However, Councillor King was not prepared to sell to the parish council at the price valued by the district valuer, and no deal was done. Considering this was 2004, and in 2012 the property that was being built was still not completed, and the untimely death of Councillor King in the autumn of 2010, it made you wonder if there was a curse on the plot. The parish council was then to move its attention to the parish playing field, with a view to having a graveyard there. But after a petition and several persons attending the March council meeting of 2005, this idea was shelved. The council was then to consider a site on the Link Road. The council, once again, was not to try to use compulsory purchase, but a few years later, South Holland District Council was to threaten the use of compulsory purchase, and were successful in acquiring a piece of land for a traveller's site. Eventually the council was to find a site down Aldgate. This was to result in a precept rise of nearly 14% for the 2006-2007 year. By the autumn of 2006, talk in the council was of having a deputy clerk, with the aim of training this person to ultimately be the new clerk. Councillor Harrington informed members that he had taken advice from Jim Scarsbrook at South Holland District Council regarding the position of the deputy clerk, and had been advised as long as he did not vote once the parish council had agreed to proceed, then he could take part in the appointment process. March was to see it reported that there had been 15 applications, and it was agreed that Councillors Hutchinson, Harrington, Keeble, Mail and Warrender arrange a date to go through the applications and arrange interviews, and they were given executive powers to appoint. At the council meeting of April 2007, Councillor Harrington reported on how well the subcommittee had conducted the interviews, when it was unanimously agreed that Mr Granville Hawkes of Quadering be appointed for a 6-month trial period as from the 1st of May. He was introduced to members at the May council meeting. At the council meeting of April 2008, it was agreed by members that the clerk and the assistant clerk reverse their existing roles with effect from the 1st of April 2009. Councillor Harrington left the meeting during the discussion. At the council meeting on Monday the 20th of April 2009, the chairman, Councillor Terry Harrington, reminded members that 2 years previously Mr Granville Hawkes was appointed assistant clerk, with a view that he would become clerk in April 2009. And members resolved that he be appointed clerk. The clerk is the official officer of the council, responsible for the day-to-day running, to see that the council acts equally and fairly, and within the law. And with what had gone on before, the unenviable task of sorting out the Cranfield Bank allotment boundary, the clerk should advise councillors if their policies what they're proposing are not right, even if they do not like what they're hearing. But the council was still paying rent for what was in Mr Palmer's garden, as the Crown Estate had not provided the parish council with a deed of release in 2005 when the fence was erected. The clerk, Mrs Harrington, had been instructed by the council to write to the Crown, and when she reported that no reply had been received, she was instructed to send a reminder. But when the reminder was not replied to, nothing happened. Mr Hawkes was to write to the Crown in 2010 and receive a reply. Soon afterwards, Mr Hawkes was out of favour. November 2010, his last appearance at the parish council, with him officially leaving the council in June 2011, and with Mr Hawkes carrying on as clerk of Wapload Parish Council was to leave Cubro Chambers, while Western Parish Council were happy to spend £100 removing a swing from an allotment. So had Mr Hawkes suffered a witch hunt due to him not following previous council policy? On the 16th of May, a notice was placed in the parish council notice board, informing parishioners they may view the council's accounts for the year ending March 2012. The date of display entered on the notice was the 2nd of May, but was actually placed in the notice board where the 14th of May's agenda was. On the notice there was council/meeting, and this should be deleted as appropriate, but was not done. And at the bottom, where it said the name of the person responsible for the notice, it was not signed. One evening, the council's Kubota was seen left running without a driver. Was this an invitation for somebody from HOLBEACH in Bloom to get on it and cut the grass for the council? It seemed the council staff were leaving more and more to be done by the HOLBEACH in Bloom volunteers. HOLBEACH in Bloom had requested a meeting with the council to discuss who was responsible for what. A date was agreed, and then cancelled by the chairman, Councillor Savoury. When HOLBEACH in Bloom complained to the clerk that the flower beds were not ready for planting, they were told that the staff were busy at the beacon, preparing for the Jubilee celebrations. But no work was done there until the 1st of June. And after the celebrations, it was the volunteers of HOLBEACH in Bloom that removed the wallflowers from around the beacon. The planters around the town had been planted with violas in the autumn. These had flowered very well, providing the town with a blaze of colour. But unfortunately, some planters had died, suffering from sap-sucking greenfly. The bugs had wreaked devastation, but rumours were that it was not just the planters that were suffering from bugs.